Welcome in, everybody. This is season 1, episode 2 of Next Up. Thank you for watching. We are doing quite well on the Apple podcast ratings. Very grateful to folks for listening to us on your favorite podcast network and platform, and for watching on YouTube. Thank you for being part of helping us launch Next Up. We couldn't be more grateful. Today on the program, some breaking news that we broke earlier today on Two-Way, where I am editor-in-chief, about President Trump's plans to replace his national security advisor. I'll have more details on that. And Gavin Newsom will be here as our guest, California Governor, to talk about what he thinks are the myths related to Gavin Newsom. I think there's some myths that are pretty important that I want to see what he thinks. And with us to have a roundtable conversation, my two favorite Jessicas from California, Jessica Millan-Patterson, who until recently was the chair of the California Republican Party, and the great Jessica Reed Kraus, Substacker and Instagrammer extraordinaire. We'll talk about the state of the Golden State and what they think of what's happened so far in the Trump administration. I'm also going to talk about running for president and what I think is important to think about if you want to be a pro-handicapper, particularly for the Democrats in 2028. So thank you for being here. Let's get started. First, news I broke earlier today, what we like to call a worldwide exclusive. President Trump, after a long period of consideration, is getting rid of his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, who came in to the job with an incredible reputation. When President Trump named him national security advisor, many people said this was a great sign that Trump 2.0 was picking adults and pros. Well, the decision to get rid of Waltz has been percolating for a long time. You'll recall that he led that Signal chat group that caused so much controversy and raised questions about his competence. Ironically, I think that controversy helped keep Waltz in his job for longer, because President Trump didn't want to give a scalp to those like Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, who were saying that what Waltz did violated all sensible procedures. What's been going on behind the scenes, and I've been reporting on this for several weeks, is that people in the national security part of the administration, at the State Department, elsewhere in the White House, at the National Economic Council, people connected to at the highest levels of the West Wing, it wasn't about ideology. It wasn't the question of whether Waltz was too neocon or wasn't on the right side of issues. It was about process and competence. People thought he was too concerned about being in charge and not running a tight ship. The National Security Council staff is not very big. They sit right in the West Wing near the president. And Waltz was considered to be simply not up to the job of managing that daily flow of information. You've got embassies around the world. You've got the Pentagon, the State Department, the Treasury's involved in national security. That was another building, another part of the Trump administration that just said, Waltz simply just can't do the job. Surprising. Military background, senior intelligence positions on Capitol Hill as a Florida congressman, very well regarded. But this was seen as a failure even before Signalgate. People were telling me he's not going to be long for the job. The reason that this has been delayed, besides the president not wanting to give the media the satisfaction of getting rid of his national security advisor, is they need someone to take the job. And they've had a difficulty finding someone. They considered a guy from the State Department, Marco Rubio's number 2. He's doing such a good job. He's got job lock. I feel bad for the guy because I think he'd probably like to be national security advisor. But he's not going to get the job, I'm told, because Rubio says, no, he's too valuable helping run the State Department. The person who is front and center to potentially get the job is Steve Witkoff. Now, this is some reporting that I think I'm ahead on also about where this stands. Steve Witkoff is a developer. He's a businessman. He's a friend of Trump's, and he is one of the surprises of this term. He's given a senior job. He's basically the negotiator for everything. First, he's negotiating on the Middle East, then he was negotiating on Russia and Ukraine. And his capacity to do this job is celebrated in some cases. They say he's a guy who can get stuff done. He's got the confidence of the president. He's met with Putin several times, first senior official like that since the war started. So that's like the glass half full view of Witkoff. But there are a lot of people in not just deep state diplomats and liberals. There are a lot of people in the government who are very supportive of the president's agenda who think Witkoff is in totally over his head. So yesterday, before I got wind of the replacement plan with the national security advisor, a story popped up in the New York Post. Very negative story about Witkoff. Strange place for it to be. The New York Post is not normally doing deep dives on this kind of thing. and had filled with all these negative quotes, going really hard at Witkoff, saying Steve Witkoff is completely unqualified to be at the highest level of American national security. He's doing irresponsible things. He's going to meetings with Putin without his own translator, not really understanding how to do it. It seemed to me like an effort to try to get Witkoff at the time, to try to get Witkoff out of these senior negotiating roles. In fact, what I'm now told is that story was planted by people who had wind of the fact that Trump was about to replace Waltz with Witkoff and want to stop him from getting the job. Now, he's got a lot of supporters in the West Wing. There are a lot of people who think he's doing a great job and would be fine having him as be national security advisor. But there are other people who don't want it to happen. The president faced a choice whether to delay the decision to get rid of Waltz, which again was being called for by lots of people around him until they could find a candidate, or fire him and leave the job basically open, or have Waltz do it until they find the replacement and try to find a replacement. This is so common, not just for Donald Trump, who's not the best at personnel, but for any president, which is, okay, we got to get rid of person X, but we don't have the replacement. So I think what happened today, and I'm not sure about this because I didn't ask my sources, but I confirmed this story after the initial tip really easily, right? So for a reporter, normally you get a tip. Sometimes it can take hours, sometimes days to get a second source. I got my second and third source almost as quick as I could dial up some additional people. Here's what I think happened. It's my speculation, but I think I'm right. The people who wanted Waltz out and don't want Witkoff in couldn't come up with another candidate, but they wanted Waltz out. They didn't want to let the president change his mind, because sometimes Donald Trump will change his mind. And so what I think happened is they said, let's put out the story that Waltz is gone. That'll force the president's hand. The president won't have the excuse of saying, well, I can't get rid of him until we have the replacement. And so I'm not saying I was used. I might have been rented to say, let's put this out. Let's force the president to do what he's committed to doing, getting rid of Waltz, and then he'll find someone. I don't know whether Witkoff's going to end up in the job. Based on this reporting I've done so far, I don't think so. I think he's got some strong supporters, but I think there's some opposition. But the important thing is that the president's, either his hand was forced or people didn't want to wait around to see. Didn't want to wait around to see whether he would follow through, because sometimes Donald Trump follows through on personnel stuff and sometimes he doesn't. I'll keep covering the story. I'll have more on two-way tonight to talk about it, and of course we'll keep tracking it. Follow me on social media as well for my reporting on that. All right, the other thing I want to talk to you about before we talk to Gavin Newsom is about presidential politics, okay? Lots of you are super interested in it. You can't get enough of saying who's going to be the next president or who's going to be the next nominees of the major parties. On the Republican side, I think J.D. Vance is in a very strong position. The Democratic side's wide open, right? They don't control the White House. We're past the period of Clinton's, Obama's, Biden, right? Those three families, those three dynasties have taken up a lot of room. And now the question is, who's it going to be in 2028? And one of the great joys I have is covering presidential politics. One of the great frustrations I have is everybody thinks they know. And I'm here to tell you again, with humility and confidence, born from having done this for decades and having not only spent time with everybody who's become president during my career before they were president, sometimes well before, but also studying the history and saying, from Reagan forward, what does it take? What does it take to get the nomination and to win the White House? And I think there's one factor to me that is more important than any other one, and it's so underrated. And people say, oh, it's going to be Wes Moore, or it's going to be Governor Beshear of Kentucky. And I really think people are off track. People in the Democratic Party, and I say respect, I don't know if the Democrats are going to win or lose the White House. I don't know who they're going to nominate. But understanding the universe of possible people, my track record on that, again, I say with humility, it's pretty good. I don't always know who's going to be the nominee, but I generally know who's not going to be the nominee. And that's primarily because of this one factor, is who understands how to play at this level, what I call being part of the national conversation. People say, shocking that Donald Trump got the nomination. No way he could possibly get it. And if you go back and look at the record, I had a sense he could get it, because even though he wasn't in politics as a candidate, he was part of the national conversation for decades. Meeting people, talking to voters, politicians, donors, activists, leaders in business. having that experience gives you a base of knowledge and an understanding of the country, but it also gives you a sense of how to perform. Okay, so I want to talk about why I'm skeptical about some of the current Democrats who are talked about as possible candidates. But first, I want to show you what I consider kind of like the gold standard in some ways of this question of what does it take. Okay, people say, well, if you go back to the 2008 cycle, no one knew in 2005, which is the equivalent of the year we're in now in the 4-year cycle, that Barack Obama would be the nominee. So who could have possibly known? Many people, because when he was at Harvard Law School, when he ran for the Senate in 2004, when he gave the keynote address at the Democratic Convention in 2004, everybody said this guy's a super talent. Maybe he won't win in 2008, but you couldn't rule it out that he could be the nominee, even up against Hillary Clinton and other people who were more established. He was part of the national conversation, not for decades. Policy, press, ideas. And I say to people all the time about Barack Obama, he did something in the period from 2004, when he gave that keynote address in Boston at John Kerry's convention, through 2008, when he beat Hillary Clinton and then beat John McCain. He had showed such great skills. And when I say to people, it's a simple 3-part test. Can you go on a late night comedy show? Can you go on Monday Night Football or some big sports venue? And can you go on a high-profile news interview and ace them all? And I'm going to show you Barack Obama acing them all: the Today Show, Monday Night Football, and a late night comedy show, Letterman. And imagine Wes Moore or Governor Beshear of Kentucky or Gretchen Whitmer. Imagine them acing it the way Barack Obama did. Take a look.
You know, you are the equivalent of a rock star in politics.
You know, we live in a celebrity culture, and so I'm always a little bit suspicious of the hype, and that's probably my Kansas side of me.
So tonight, I'd like to put all the doubts to rest. I would like to announce to my hometown of Chicago and all of America that I am ready for the Bears to go all the way, baby. Dun, 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 dun.
Met the president? You must know the president.
Well, you know, he called me. He was very gracious after the election. He gave me a call, and we both agreed that we had married up. Mm-hmm. And then he invited me over to the White House, and we had breakfast with Dick Cheney and Karl Rove, and it was a real fun time.
Yeah, it sounds like.
I mean, again, you might not like Barack Obama. You might think he was a horrible president, but that's a star, right? That is poised in 3 different kind of venues. Now, some of these prospective candidates, maybe they could do well on the Today Show, or maybe they could do well on Monday Night Football or late night. But I don't see any of them. I wouldn't have confidence in any of the 3 of them at that level of performance. And it's likability, it's confidence, but it's also an understanding of what these different venues are. And of course, now today, there are way more venues than there used to be. There's this program, there's Megan's program, there's so many different programs people can go on, but you still have to understand the national conversation. You have to understand America. So we talk about some of the people who are discussed now as prospective candidates. And I'm gonna tell you about my skepticism. It extends to the whole field. Gavin Newsom will be here later. Arguably, of all the people talked about for running, the 2 Californians, Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, are the 2 with the most experience in this realm, being part of the national conversation, okay? So I'm least skeptical about them on that measure, although I'm skeptical about them both for other reasons. But all these other people, Governor Shapiro, Pennsylvania, Cory Booker, who's run before, they just don't have this level of experience, whether it's over a long period of time like Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, or a very concentrated way like George W. Bush and Barack Obama. They just don't have that. So Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, big state, talked about as a potential candidate for a while, talked about potentially being running mate for Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. And again, I got nothing against her. She's obviously a talented politician. Being able to get elected governor of Michigan, that alone is a huge feat. But the gap between even a mega state and running for president successfully, again, it's massive. Gretchen Whitmer knows a lot of people, I bet she thinks. Gretchen Whitmer thinks, well, I survived a lot of controversies, a lot of pressure situations. case study, Gretchen Whitmer. COVID. She was governor during COVID. A huge test for anybody in elective office. A lot of pressure. Pressure from business, pressure from parents, pressure from public health officials. I watched Gretchen Whitmer closely. And again, I'm using her as a case study, but I think what I'm saying about her applies to everybody else who I see named as a possible candidate. Even Pete Buttigieg, who served in the cabinet. Okay? Here's Gretchen Whitmer during COVID. Okay? Couple things happened that just really stayed with me. First of all, Gretchen Whitmer's husband during COVID wanted to take his boat out. Was against the rules to go take your boat out. Purported Northern Michigan boat launch request fuels controversy for Whitmer from the Detroit News. Then 108, New York Times. Okay? Michigan governor says husband request was, quote, failed attempt at humor. Her husband basically said, I'm going to get my boat out because I'm the governor's husband. Again, just bad judgment. You could say, well, that's a one-off. You know, he lost his head. He really wanted to go out in the boat. Also during COVID, Gretchen Whitmer decides, even though there's a travel ban, people said you shouldn't be traveling out of state. Gretchen Whitmer decided to travel out of state 3 times in 6 months during COVID, at least once to go visit her mom. Understandable. But this is not the ancient history. This was not that long ago. It's not just bad judgment, but it demonstrates a lack of awareness of what it takes to do this thing under excruciating pressure. Now, I will tell you something that hasn't been reported as far as I know. Donald Trump is incredibly interested in presidential politics generally. He's super interested in the 2028 race. And his bandwidth is crazy. You would think, well, he's got more other things to worry about as president. He does, but he's really interested in who's going to be the Republican nominee, probably J.D. Vance, who's going to be the Democratic nominee. And his interest is not passive. He wants to muck around in the Democratic race. He wants to be a player in figuring out who the Democrats are going to nominate. So Gretchen Whitmer, 3 weeks ago, goes to the White House to try to lobby for different things for Michigan, including support for this air base that needed some federal help. And the president, unbeknownst to her, horrible staff work for her team, brings her into the Oval Office. You've probably seen this photo, famous picture the New York Times took. Gretchen Whitmer's in the Oval Office, Trump signing executive orders attacking Democrats, okay, and going after his enemies, as many of the executive orders have. And she's in there, and Trump talks, praises her, whatever. She then somehow gets it in her head that she can make herself invisible by holding a blue folder up to her face. So she holds the blue folder up to her face. It produced one of the most humiliating political photographs I can recall seeing, because she's there in the Oval Office trying to hide the fact that she's in there with Donald Trump. Okay, so that was bad. Now, flash forward to 3 weeks later, and Trump's going to Michigan to celebrate 100 days in office, give a big speech. She didn't go to that. She did greet him, though, when he arrived in the state on the tarmac in Michigan, as governors do, even if the president's from the other party. And once again, snookered by Donald Trump. He comes down the steps of Air Force One, you can see here, and you see Gretchen Whitmer puts out her hand to get a handshake, and Trump hugs her. And he hugs her in a way that she can't avoid hugging him back, patting him a couple times on the shoulder. Now, some people say, well, that's great for her, right? That's great because it shows that she's helping to fight for her state. Then later at the event, Trump introduces her, and she's not expecting to speak, but once again, bad staff work. She's tricked into speaking. Listen to how awkward it is, where she basically thanks Trump without saying his name.
I want to thank you very much, Gretchen. Good job. Thank you.
I hadn't planned to speak, but I'm on behalf of all the military men and women who serve our country and serve so honorably on behalf of the state of Michigan. I am really damn happy we're here to celebrate this recapitalization at Selfridge. It's crucial for the Michigan economy. It's crucial for the men and women here, for our homeland security and our future. So thank you. I'm so grateful that this announcement was made today. And I appreciate all the work. Thank you.
Okay, so if Gretchen Whitmer ends up running for president, the blue folder in front of her face, the handshake, the awkward remarks, it may not matter. She's putting herself in the same camp as Governor Newsom, saying, I'm fine with being nice to Trump when it's in my state's interest. But what I see here is not just bad staff work, but not playing at the level required to get through the gauntlet. Now, somebody's going to get through the gauntlet, and if I'm right that they're all pretty weak, like a second-grade soccer league, even if all the teams are bad, somebody wins the championship. But my caution here, my main message on this is, if you think that it's easy to run for president. And if you think being successful as a governor or senator or business person is enough, it's not. Have you been in the national conversation? Have you been talking to people about America? And I don't see it in Gretchen Whitmer, but I don't see it in almost any of these other people. And I think Donald Trump is going to do his best to muck around and embarrass and humiliate and taunt all the Democrats to try to figure out how he can weaken the entire party so his chosen candidate, which I think will be J.D. Vance, will work. All right. Coming up, someone who is discussed as a potential presidential candidate, California Governor Gavin Newsom. He is, in fact, very experienced in the national conversation, and it's one reason I think people underrate him as a potential presidential candidate. We're going to talk about how what I hear about Governor Newsom, he hears it too, try to dispel some of the myths and maybe break a little news. So stay tuned for California Governor Newsom next up right here. Hey everybody, you know the secret to great days? Well, it's better nights. And it all starts by turning your bedroom into a sanctuary with Cozy Earth. Their bamboo sheet set, it's the softest, coolest, most luxurious sheets you'll ever use. Breathable, temperature regulating, and crafted to help you sleep like it actually matters, because sleep matters a lot. Imagine crawling into bed every night, you're feeling restored, you're refreshed, and you're ready to take on the next day. Also, don't forget about the bamboo pajamas from Cozy Earth. They're lightweight, very cozy, and they're designed to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. That's what we all need. It's the sleepwear upgrade you didn't know you needed, but you definitely deserve. We all do. Cozy Earth makes it easy to try all this for yourself. You get 100 nights risk-free to fall in love. Plus, every bedding product is backed by their 10-year warranty. So you got nothing to lose. Give it a try. Take your time to prioritize your sleep and prioritize you. Right now, go visit CozyEarth.com. You can start sleeping better right away with Cozy Earth. Again, go to CozyEarth.com. Welcome back to Next Up. Next up here, Gavin Newsom. Kind of like what you say on your program. Gavin Newsom is a father, former lieutenant governor, former mayor, former supervisor, happens to currently be the governor of California. But for most of America now, he's a leading video podcaster. Governor, welcome. Thank you for making time.
I appreciate it.
What have you learned about life from hosting your program now for a few months?
A lot of people have strong opinions about platforming and engaging with folks that they don't necessarily agree with. And I think it's been illuminating. It's been insightful. It's certainly been educational. And it's exceeded my expectation. I've really enjoyed it. And I think it's important to reach out to folks we disagree with, to not be disagreeable in the process. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of anxiety out there, a lot of stress, a lot of trauma from the last election, and not everybody is prepared to have those conversations.
I've listened to every episode. I love your show, and I love what you're doing. And I think I agree with what you're suggesting, that it's nuts. You're not going to use that word probably, but it's nuts the way people have reacted negatively to you talking to people. And I've enjoyed the ones that have been a little bit tetchy and contentious and kind of combative. And I've enjoyed the ones that have been friendly, whether you're interviewing Democrats or conservatives. I think it's great. I'd even say it's historic what you've done. And it pains me that you've gotten some of the negative reaction you have, because I don't understand what these people think you're supposed to do in America besides talk to people you disagree with and listen.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we're a little bit desperate right now. I mean, for a sense of belonging, a sense of well-being, and tearing other people down 24/7. I mean, the election's over. Democrats got shellacked. Donald Trump, wasn't historic. That's BS. But he beat us, and he beat us badly. And I think we need to have a little humility and a little grace and understanding of why, what happened, who are the architects of his success, who are the folks that believe in him, why did we lose in almost every demographic group, why did he gain in almost every demographic group, why young men are moving away from the Democratic Party. And so I do think it's important to have a forensic. If we don't do that, we're going to have a hell of a time in the next few years figuring out a path back.
Once you and I get a long weekend together, I want to do like Mystery Science Theater and sit and watch them all with you and talk about them. And we're not going to have time to do much, but I want to talk to you about Charlie Kirk. He's someone whose show I've appeared on. He's come on the two-way platform with me. What would you tell Democrats about how Charlie Kirk has succeeded in his multidimensional thing that he does, and the lessons that are there for your party?
Well, he does two things at once. He floods the zone and he listens and he engages. He's willing to debate, and he's willing to debate anyone. He shows up. He has a strategy. He has a plan. He's showing up in places you wouldn't expect. He's showing up in places you wouldn't expect with crowds you wouldn't expect. And we've no one on our side doing what Charlie Kirk is doing. And he's converting young folks. He's converting young men. I wasn't joking when I talked to Charlie. I said, my son, I wasn't making this up. I said, my 13-year-old son wanted to skip school to meet him, not because he agrees with him, just because he knows him, because he's in his algorithm. It's not just Charlie Kirk, it's Jordan Peterson, it's Andrew Tate. It's something's going on here that we need to pay attention to. And you saw Charlie was successful in building that movement with young folks that was net plus 15. 56% of young men voted for Trump. That's a big move. And of course, I've tried to move in a direction of understanding that even more fully by having guys like Scott Galloway on, Richard Reeves on, Jackson Katz, to understand a broader movement, what's happening with young men across this country, which are in crisis. Young men are in crisis right now of identity back to meaning, purpose, and mission. And I think the Democratic Party, just from an electoral perspective, needs to address that. Societally, we have a responsibility by definition.
I really mean it when I say people should listen to your show, particularly Democrats. And I would literally want to talk to you about every episode, but we don't have time. Who's the closest in your party now to Charlie Kirk?
That's a great question. I honestly am struggling with that. That said, there are a lot of great people, I think, doing a wonderful job online. Midas Touch and what they've been able to do and sort of expose to a broader audience and platforming folks. There are a number of folks that are iterating in this space. But look, 9 out of 10 top podcasts tend to lean more conservative. We've seen that with cable networks. I think 15 out of 16 top rated shows, obviously more conservative. Fox dominating in that space. But it's not just Fox. It's across the spectrum and what Sinclair Broadcasting is doing and what's happening around the ecosystem of right-wing populism. And so I just think Democratic Party needs to wake up for this. It's not just a communications problem. It's not as simple as that, but it's certainly part of that. And this is what I'm trying to iterate about and what I'm trying to illuminate.
I'm overwhelmed with how much I want to talk to you about. So I'm going to ask you about one small myth, and then I want to talk to you about 4 big ones. The small myth, you hear from Republicans all the time, your friend Sean Hannity, that people are leaving California in droves and that you're going to be there, everybody will be gone, and you'll be the last one in the state. Tell people the announcement your office made today about the population of California.
Well, just another year back-to-back of population growth. The last time we had a population decline, there were 11 states in the country 3 years ago that saw population decline. 2 out of the 3 top states were Republican states, for what it's worth. We were number 11. We lost a whopping 151 people. So this mass exodus is wildly overblown. And accordingly, I think it's interesting to highlight, IMF came out just a week ago showing California is the 4th largest economy in the world, $4.1 trillion, $412 billion of manufacturing, 41% greater than the number 2 state. Number 1 in direct foreign investment, two-way trade. We dominate in every major industry in the United States. There's not a state in this country where we do not outperform in terms of that category, including hunting jobs, forestry jobs, including agricultural jobs, 150% larger than the next largest state. And I think for me, the biggest thing that I want to communicate, Mark, to you and others about this notion of California being a failed state, besides having more Fortune 500 companies than we've ever had in over 15 years, that was Fortune just announced that. We also have more scientists, engineers, researchers, more Nobel laureates than any other state, the finest system of higher education, and we contributed $83.1 billion more than the federal government provided us. And I compare and contrast that not as a cheap shot, but as a point of reference. Texas took in $71.1 billion. A lot of mythology about California.
Okay. I don't want to minimize your list, but you also have more In-N-Out burgers than any other state.
And we have more.
That's important. All right. So 4 big myths. I've known you a long time. We don't know each other well, but I've been so interested in you as a political figure. You've done as mayor and as lieutenant governor of governor. You've done a lot of interesting and important things. And I listen all day, almost every day, to people back east saying things about you, Democrats, Republicans, very political people, not political people, it just doesn't accord with my conception of you. So I'm going to run through 4 Gavin Newsom myths, and you tell me if you're familiar with them. I bet you are, and just not in a defensive way, but just to tell the truth about what the reality is. And I'm hoping I can just show this to people, and rather than having to explain it myself every time. So one myth is that you're a crazy liberal, that you're so far to the left, you've governed as a liberal. You've always been a liberal, and that you've done a few things of late, like with Charlie Kirk, to try to pretend you're more moderate. That's not true. But explain to people, you give yourself a label or not. What do you say about the myth? I say it's a myth that you're far to the left of the country.
Well, I was accused of being a conservative as mayor of San Francisco. I continue to be considered similarly as governor of California. Someone that balanced his budget, that provided the biggest tax rebate in U.S. history, $18.5 billion, that has consistently opposed state efforts to increase our wealth tax or our income tax, top line income tax. I'm a pragmatist. I'm a small business owner. I've created 22 small businesses, taking pen to paper, close to 1,000 people that I've had the privilege of employing in the state. I've had an entrepreneurial mindset. I embrace innovation and free enterprise. And so this notion that I'm a wild-haired liberal is just nonsense. That said, on progressive social issues, I stand tall and firm in terms of my advocacy.
Well, you were way out ahead of some other of your Democratic friends, including some Californians, on same-sex marriage. And there are some social issues, abortion rights, but there are other social issues, and there's one in the news this week where you have said your party might be going too far, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, just as it relates to sex predators going after children. To me, it's just common sense. By the way, I thought it was common sense what I did in 2004 on same-sex marriage. And you're right, my party was the most vocal and critical against those actions. I didn't think in any way infringed on other people's rights. I thought it was the right thing to do. The American people now have come to accept that. But look, I've long called balls and strikes, and I've always been a hard-headed pragmatist on issues. I haven't taken a back seat on many social issues as it relates to the values that I hold dear and embracing our diversity, celebrating our diversity. I know that's something that's verboten now, and I call out people that belittle other people and talk down to people and play those kind of politics that I don't think is becoming of America.
Again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to put a button on this first myth. Is it fair to say that you think in some ways on economics, social issues, maybe issues related to immigration, not every issue, but on some issues, your party's gone too far to the left? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Look, you can't be pro-job and anti-business. At the same time, businesses can't thrive in a world that's failing. And that's my mindset. It's growth and inclusion. And it's always been that. Look, this is a state that has 18% of the world's R&D. It's a point of deep pride. We dominate in AI. We dominate in innovation entrepreneurialism. We've got to invest in those growth engines, and we've got to invest in those innovators at the same time.
All right, America, meet me at camera 1. He's not a crazy liberal. The myth exposed, debunked. Second myth, and I'm just going to say it straight. And I know you've heard. I know you've heard the first one. I don't even need to ask you. I know you've heard this one too. You're an ambitious, pretty boy. You're a lightweight. Ted Cruz on this program called you the other day incandescently ambitious. So look,
coming from Ted, I appreciate that. That's amazing.
I'm not going to violate anything by saying you're a handsome man, and there are things about you that are, I'd say, slick in the sense of you're a handsome man, but just head that off. You're not in this as a pretty boy or a lightweight. You're a thinker. You're a doer, right? It's a myth to say that you're a ambitious pretty boy who's in politics because it's glamorous.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I'm most passionate about is policy. I mean, I'm passionate about public policy. And I think you may have tangentially been covering me many, many moons ago when I was out there doing something called Great Cities, Great Ideas. I ran for mayor of San Francisco on 26 policy papers, put out white papers, wrote a book as lieutenant governor about platform thinking, how to take the town square digital and reinvent government. That was sort of ahead of its time as it relates to Doge today. It's been a point of pride, what we've done in California as it relates to advancing public policy through a lens of good public policy mindset, meaning our commitment to the best politics is a better idea, and our commitment to be pragmatic, not ideological in terms of pursuit of public policy. But it's absolutely untrue that I wake up with sort of a Geiger or some sort of political lens to every decision I make. It's just total BS.
Right. Okay. And just to put a button on that one, and I'm not asking you to brag here, but my perception of you is that you could sit down with Bill Clinton or Newt Gingrich or any public official known to be a policy wonk, and you'd have no problem keeping up with them, correct?
In fact, those two individuals, I've spent extended period of time over the years talking about governance. And by the way, Bill Clinton in particular is one of the things I think we're missing in our party right now is a little bit, not just of community opportunity, but this notion of responsibility in sort of the lexicon of the DLC and what Bill Clinton provided in terms of that mindset. And I think it's absolutely.
It's not my job to be your spokesman or to defend you, but folks, this is a myth. This is a myth. This is a serious person, and it shouldn't even have to be said. My only recommendation to you is maybe less product in your hair.
Jesus, here we go again. You and my mother.
Maybe gain 50 pounds like I did. Do something. Do something. All right. Another myth. This is number 3. This will be easy to dispatch. Every day, you'll say, "Of course he's running for president. Of course." Right now, I'm not saying you won't.
Yeah.
But I know because I know you and I know people who know you. You might not. It's not. It's not like you've decided to. So just. I'm not trying to make news here because I know it's not an easy answer. You might, but it's not. You're not bound to run. Not only not to run in 28. My sense of you is you may never run. Right?
By the way, I'm with you 1,000% what you just said. 1,000, not 100%. Yeah. I might. I don't know. But I have to have a burning why, and I have to have a compelling vision that distinguishes myself from anybody else. Without both. And I don't deserve to even be in the conversation, but I am someone that's I'm trying to pursue the unknown. I'm interested. I'm open to argument. I want to engage folks, and I want to learn. I want to iterate. I have an entrepreneurial mindset, and to the extent that brings me in the political conversation, I'm blessed by that. And to the extent it helps me leverage my day job as government, all the better.
But you have not in your head or said to anyone, I'm going to run. I'm going to run at 28. I'm definitely
absolutely.
running.
My closest advisors, my wife and other. I got 4 kids that are desperate for my term to end to get their dad back.
And that's the thing I tell people all the time. And I don't want to pry into your personal life, so of course you speak to this as much as you wish. I say to people, he's got a wife and kids who I would say are at best ambivalent about your running, mixed feelings. They may not be dead set against it, but if you said, again, you tell me this is right. If you went home tonight and said, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I want to spend time with you all. They would be delighted. And that's important to you, correct?
Oh my gosh. I had my oldest daughter last night. She's 15, almost in tears because she can't take it anymore because she's got someone now with her because of the world we're living in. Ted was talking about that on your show a couple days ago. Things have radically changed. She said, Dad, I can't take it anymore. When are you done with this? Give us our life back. No, it's very intense and emotional. And by the way, for Ted Cruz, his daughter was treated badly by folks, and we needed to call that out. It's terrible what's going on both sides of the aisle in this as it relates to families and these relationships.
And again, you mentioned your daughter. My understanding is your wife's not crazy about you running for president, correct?
No, look, and I'm so proud of my wife. She's been a champion. She's a fierce champion of women and girls, but also boys and men. She did a documentary 10 years ago on the crisis of masculinity called Mask You Live In, and she continues in that advocacy and in that frame. And she wants me to be a great father. That's her mission in life. And I'll tell you what, that is the most important thing for me. I figured that out. I got 4 young kids, 2 boys, 2 girls. And to me, that's the lens to which every decision needs to be made.
So just again, to put one more button on this, when people say to me, Gavin Newsom's definitely running. It's so obvious. He's unconditionally ambitious. Of course he's running. What should I say to them?
You say to be determined, unknown. It's
truly though, not just Corey, not just your lawyers say, don't say, right?
Mark, there's nothing I hate more than politicians answering this question. And the BS, 99% of the time, BS.
I almost
1% of the time, they're actually being honest.
I almost never ask people.
1%.
It's a stupid question to try to get people to announce for president, when they don't want to. I just try to put the myth to rest, and we have. Last myth is the biggest one, and we've touched on a little bit, which is that if you did run for president, or just as you think about your legacy as we head towards the end of your second and final term, people say absolute failure, that the state has been a failure. Now, I've listened to you talk a lot about this. I've read a lot about it. We could spend 5 hours on it. One thing you've done that's really caught my attention, and I will say honestly bothered me a little bit, is that when there have been some issues, you've blamed the mayors or the federal government. and you said, well, the mayor of San Francisco, your successor, not doing a good job on the streets, the previous mayor. Mayor of LA didn't do a good job on fires. And then I've heard you blame Washington. Now, I'm not holding them blameless, but you ran for the job. You know full well what happens in Washington affects the governor. The mayors, are the mayors. So are you, what would you say you've not done, you, not the state, what have you not done as well as you would have liked to have
Well,
done?
let me just, because it's incredibly important, clarify, I've never criticized the mayor of LA for the fire response. Quite the contrary. I spent the day with her yesterday. We have been in lockstep in terms of our work there. As it relates to the former mayor of San Francisco, the same. I provided unprecedented support. What I criticized was the lack of urgency as it relates to the street population and what's happening with encampments and tents. And that was a broad statement across the state of California. As a former mayor, I felt I'm in the privileged position. State's vision, national vision realized through states, but localism's determinative at the end of the day. When it comes to housing and homelessness, it's the original sin in the state of California. The affordability challenge in this state, NIMBYism in this state. We've been pounding 42 seeker reform bills I've signed. We have a huge housing package this year. We've been deeply focused on getting things done, and no state has done more to address the homeless crisis than this state. But at the end of the day, I'm not naive about the challenges that remain in the state of California. So no, accountability, buck stops here. I might as well be the mayor of California, not just the governor of California. And so from that perspective, I want to be abundantly clear.
Okay, I interpreted some of the things you said immediately after the fires as critical of the mayor. I stand corrected if I'm wrong. Okay, so just to put a button on this, because there's one other topic I want to get to. Whether you run for president or not, when you talk about your record, would you say that on balance, it is a myth to say that you are a failed governor? Is that your view?
Well, I don't know. I mean, if I'm representing a failed state, it's the fourth largest economy in the world. We dominate in every critical category. We continue to grow. We continue to outperform. We're a wealth-making machine. We're a state, by the way. I'm so sick and tired of the mythology that we're a high-tax state. It's just a lie. It's made up. 16 states tax their low-wage earners more than the state of California. Are we a high-tax state or a low-tax state? We have the highest tax rate for the 1%, but demonstrably 99% are not in that 1%. 80% of Californians are taxed about average. And you go to the aggressive states like Texas and Florida, they nail people in the lower class and the middle class compared to states like California. But number two, I also want to make this point. As it relates to investing in reforms, we've created a brand new grade, pre-K for all, after school and summer school for all. We lead the nation over the last decade in 8th grade reading growth. In the last 10 years, we're one of 3 states that's seen improvements in 4th grade reading over the last decade. We continue to make progress leading the nation in reduction of veterans' homelessness. Unsheltered homeless went up just 0.45%. 44 states saw larger growth. I recognize the responsibility I have on low carbon green growth, speaking of growth, to do more as it relates to the way we produce and consume energy and continue to dominate in that space. AI and quantum, in so many categories, the state continues just to dominate. And so I'm really proud of it. I'm proud of this state and our state of mind, and I'm proud of the fact that the state continues to grow.
Okay, again, I'm not going to fact check everything you said, but the point of the button on the
Please
fourth
do.
myth is, no, I don't have time. The button on the fourth myth is, your record of accomplishment in California is substantial. There are things like housing where you're ending your term without accomplishing everything you wanted. Same with homelessness. But people who want to say that this is a disastrous governor who didn't get anything done, it just the record doesn't show that. Governor, some yes/no questions to end with about politics. If Kamala Harris enters the gubernatorial primary, will she be the Democratic nominee?
I think so. But remember, we have an open primary, so it's a broader question.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's far and away.
Will she be the top vote getter for Democrats?
No doubt in my mind.
Okay. Do you think
if she runs, and I don't know, and I know I share your point of view. You've been doing some interesting punditry from afar. I am a little more close to it, and I can say your sources seem accurate from my perspective.
Yeah, I've said this all the time. Her Achilles heel, she doesn't like to make difficult decisions under pressure. I think she'd be afraid of losing, even though you think she'd win. And I don't know that she wants to be governor of California. It's a crazy thing. Sometimes people think, well, are they going to run for that office? They should want to do it. People say to me all the time, should I run for Senate? I said, it doesn't seem to me you want to be a senator. So you're not sure she's going to run.
I honestly, and by the way, I'm as close
Yeah.
to the people around her than
Yeah.
anybody. And
Yeah.
to this moment, I would say the vast majority of us do not know, period.
Right. And would you advise her to run? Would you tell her it's a good job for her?
I would reflect what you just said. You have to have a burning why. And if you can't enunciate that, the answer is no. Why the hell would you want this job?
Right.
You have
Who's the
to have
who's
a
the
why.
front runner if she doesn't run?
Difficult to know. I mean, there's a lot of folks in the race, and I mean, forgive me, I'm frankly focused on a lot of other things besides who the next governor is. I still got 18, 20 months, and so I'm going to run through the tape, 112-yard dash.
I want to talk about. I loved what you did with tariffs the other day on your show and on your social media, which is you talked to some real people who are being impacted by the tariffs. My family got an email from a toy store in our neighborhood. It said, toys that used to cost us $10, we're now going to pay $25 for. So tell us which toys you would spend $15 more for, and we'll order those. Tell one story. Tell one story of one of your constituents and how they say they're being impacted.
Well, I have a remarkable person in California who runs a small business for wheelchair repair and wheelchairs, and provides to ALS, the nonprofits, most of their product. It's a business that's grown 300% a year. Over year in the last few years. They just did their next order from China, $600,000, and they were asked to write an additional $830,000 check. $600,000 plus $830,000 because of the imposition of the tariffs. So he didn't make the order, and he's living off the inventory, and told all his employees that we're now near the end, and I may have to lay you off. And is talking to nonprofits like the ALS, said, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to provide you this product. There's simply no alternatives anywhere for alternative access to the kind of technology he needs for those wheelchairs. Perfect example.
Thank you for that. You've got 2 or 3 big ports in your state.
We have 3 or 4, but the 2 biggest, 40% of all the goods movement in the United States of America, Long Beach and LA, and they just announced, I was just down there yesterday, 35% decline in volume. 35%, not 3.5%. That would be alarming. 35%.
That's their projection, or that's what's happening
That's
now?
projection next week based upon what they know is not arriving. You go down there today, it's eerie. It's like the peak of COVID.
Right.
This is already happening. People don't understand that 0.3% contraction versus the 2.4% growth in the prior quarter. Again, that was before Liberation Day. The impacts of these tariffs haven't even been felt in terms of, I think, GDP growth over the next few quarters. And again, no state has more to lose, let alone more to gain than the state of California. I'll remind you again, #1 manufacturing state in the country. At peak, we'll have 500,000, by the way, Mark Porton. We have 500,000 farm workers we're going to need at peak this summer. And the chill just on the immigration uncertainty, we're seeing decline in tourism. I mean, the impacts already are outsized, but the impacts to come, I'm more concerned about.
I know you don't like the way these tariffs are being done. Are you from the camp like Bernie Sanders, who says tariffs can be very good, but I don't like this set of tariffs this way? Or are you against tariffs in general?
No, 100% with Bernie, and that's, forgive me, with Biden in that respect. I thought it was very strategic what Biden did as it relates. He significantly increased the baseline of Trump's tariffs and increased some tariffs on China. No, they can be used as a tool. But he also had an industrial policy that was worker-centered, the CHIPS and Science Act. I mean, we should be doubling the CHIPS and Science Acts, producing real results in rural parts of this country. Manufacturing was coming back in. Aspects of the IRA and the tax credits, I know not everybody agrees, but the benefits of that are being felt. The Buy America provisions. At least he had a rational approach, and Trump could have come in with a similar rational approach, but he didn't. And he's come in with an irrational approach across the spectrum, and we're paying a profound price. And again, no state, remember, China, one of our biggest trading partners, Mexico and Canada, were the size of 21 state populations combined. The impacts here outsized. That's why we initiated that lawsuit.
Can I ask you 2 foreign policy questions, or you got to go?
Please, bring it on.
Okay. China, Xi. Story in the Wall Street Journal says, in fact, there's some truth to the administration's position that China's under pressure now.
Yep.
And they're having consumer issues. Now I got an alarm here. Hopefully that'll go off. What would you advise the president to do to maximize pressure on China in this trade war?
Well, he did. I mean, by the way, what Xi appears to be doing is similar to what Trump has already done. I mean, Trump made the exceptions for smartphones. And she's similarly looking at areas, including aircraft equipment and the like, to exempt them from the 125% tariffs in China. But look, I'm concerned about what I also read today, not just as it relates to where China is, the Wall Street Journal article in particular, I think you're referring to, that sort of highlighted some of the mythology there, and they're putting on a good face, but their economic realities are a little bit more disconcerting for them. But I'm more disconcerted by the fact that the Trump administration is out there saying we need to make a deal. I mean, where do you lose all leverage when you say we need to quickly make some deals?
So where is the leverage over China?
Well, the leverage over time, I mean, obviously the two-way trade for them is going to disproportionately impact their domestic economy. I think 13% of their GDP is connected with those exports to the United States, just 3% from the U.S. to China. So there's asymmetry as it relates to that balance. The reality, though, for us, our politics is so much more situational. And he's got to look quarter to quarter. He's got to look next midterms. He's got to look at the markets. And she is obviously able to play a longer game. And that, to me, is where this leverage starts to loosen a little bit. And that's why I'm more concerned.
So I say again, where is the leverage? You're doing a good job of explaining why leverage they think they have, the president thinks he has, might not have. Where is the leverage the United States has over Xi in this trade war?
I don't think he has a tremendous amount. And I'll tell you, one of the things that really bothered me, and I'm not trying to be a spokesman for the MAGA movement or Trump, but I thought it should bother them. You know, when Apple got the exemption on the smartphones, they also announced they were moving a ton of their manufacturing not to the United States, but to India. If the whole theory of the case is that this is supposed to be supply chains home, I would have been, I would have immediately called that out. And so the whole theory of the case is being blown up. The original arguments around why we're doing tariffs and sort of this sort of ready, fire, aim approach to our allies and our trading partners. So I don't know where the leverage is. And I think the only actual leverage are the markets. And I think that's the one thing that can move this administration. Thank God for the markets. Mother Nature hasn't impressed him on low carbon green growth, but the markets certainly still bat last and bat 1,000.
I'm not going to press my luck and do the other foreign policy question. It could take too long. And I want to ask you one more thing, and grateful to you for your time. Leave aside politics, running for president or not. What are some of your unfulfilled professional ambitions? Not about your family. What are some of your unfulfilled professional ambitions?
Well, professionally, look, I mean, for me, I'm passionate entrepreneur. And so I still have a lot of business ideas that I was pursuing before I got in this racket called politics. I started right out of college with pen to paper, one part-time employee, Pat Kelly. I raised $175,000. I borrowed $7,500 from my dad, and I opened a little wine store at Greenwich and Fillmore in San Francisco. I built that business, the restaurant, a few years later, to 20 plus businesses, restaurants, hotels, 4 wineries today. I say that not to impress you, but to impress upon you passion for entrepreneurialism, a passion for entrepreneurs. And so for me, my professional ambitions beyond being in public service, of which, by the way, I was inspired by Sars Shriver. Another reason we just announced our 16th lawsuit against Trump administration on these AmeriCorps cuts. He was the guy who started VISTA, legal aid to the poor, probably more influence in the last century than most presidents. And the impact of those cuts, to me, are profound, particularly here in California. So public service matters, but I also have a passion for entrepreneurialism.
Would you consider, after your term ends, becoming the CEO of my company, Two Way, that brings creates authentic community around live conversations?
See, I'm potentially looking for a job in 20 months, so I'm not going to turn down anybody. So let's talk.
Come interview for the job, because you are interested in using technology to create authentic community. You've done a lot, and that's what we do. So it's a possibility. I'm looking for a CEO like Bob Iger, and you're as close as I can think of. Governor, so grateful to you for making time. I hope you'll come back. Don't check the Apple podcast ratings for my show versus yours, because you're
number 2. I can't even handle it. I got to near the 10 spot, but you got it. Sustainability, Mark. That's the challenge.
I understand.
You got to keep it going.
It's week 1 for me, and all week, because you and Ted Cruz have both been on. I've been watching you and Ted. You jockey, you two. You're very similarly ranked.
Is that right?
So,
Well, look, I give Ted a lot of credit for being an entrepreneur in this space and leading in that space. And also, I'll close sincerely. I wasn't making it up. I thought the best part about that damn conversation you had with him was talking about his kids and family. And I hope everybody listening pays attention to that. He is a father and he's a husband. And that to me is sacred space for everybody out there.
agree. Totally agree. I've gotten a ton of feedback for people who said, I think of Ted Cruz in a different light because he said that.
Yeah,
and
there you go.
How strongly they feel. So I'm grateful for you making time. I look forward to watching you run through the tape. I'll say again, I'm not your spokesman. There are things I could say negative, but those 4 myths, I'm sure they drive you more crazy than they drive me, and I'm glad we got to address them.
God bless. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Governor, thank you. And we'll be back right after this. I want to tell you a story now. It's about a guy named Leo Grillo. Leo was on a road trip, and he came across a Doberman. This dog was severely underweight, clearly in a lot of trouble, in need of a lot of help. Leo rescued the Doberman, and he gave the dog a name, Delta. Sadly, Delta was just one of many animals that needed help, which inspired Leo to start Delta Rescue. It's the largest no-kill, care-for-life animal sanctuary in the entire world. They've rescued thousands of dogs and cats and horses from the wilderness, and they provide their animals with shelter, love, safety, and a warm home. The dedication and everlasting love to animals is Leo's mission, and it's Leo's legacy. Delta Rescue relies solely on contributions from people like all of us. So if you want caring for these animals to be a part of your legacy, you've got an opportunity here. You can speak with your estate planner because there are tax-saving estate planning benefits to going this direction. You can grow your estate while letting your love for animals live well into the future. Check out the estate planning tab on their website to learn more, and you can speak with an advisor. We call dog man's best friend for a good reason. You can help those who need it most. Please, please visit deltarescue.org today to learn more. Again, that's deltarescue.org. You won't regret it. Welcome back to Next Up. Thank you for being with us here now to talk about California, 2 lifetime Californians, both named Jessica. And they're meeting here for the first time. Couldn't be more excited to have you both here. Jessica Millan Patterson was the chair up until recently of the California Republican Party. And Jessica Reed Kraus is, I'm told to say you're an independent journalist, but I think of you more as a voice of a generation. How about that? You're both moms, and you're both super interested in America and in your state. So let's start with California, which we talked to Governor Newsom about, and I'll have to figure out how to nickname you, Jessica P. What's the state of California from your point of view right now? How's it going? Because it's a great state, has a thriving, huge economy. What's sort of your state of California?
Right. So just last week, it was announced that we are the 4th largest economy in the world. And it doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people because only 15% of Californians can afford to buy a home here. We are losing people faster than we are gaining them. I think Democrat one-party rule has failed Californians, and that's shown by the fact that for the first time in our state's history, we lost a congressional district. And right now, we're on track to lose 4 more by 2030. And it's absolutely been Democrats in charge of everything here. So what I would say is that the Golden State is not quite as golden as it used to be, but I think there are a lot of opportunities on the horizon. And I think a lot of Californians, thanks to great independent journalism that's happening in our state and that's talking about the real problems of California and who has caused these problems, Californians are waking up and they're ready for some change.
JRK, as I sometimes call you, kind of like RFK. What do you love, and your 4 boys and your husband, what do you guys love about California? What's still great from your point of view about California?
Well, we live in San Clemente, California, and it's still sort of a kind of like a old school beach town vibe. And my boys are, they have a lot of freedom here. They run around, they're surfing, they're on bikes, they take the trolley. And there's like a sense of community here where the kids still go out and, do things outside. And so we love the ocean. My office here in Laguna is right by, the beach. We would never not live in California, But obviously there's major problems, and I don't have all the statistics like Jessica, but just driving around, LA, you see the homelessness, the epidemic, and it kind of made its way here, and we kicked them out really quick because it became a whole problem with tents popping up everywhere after COVID. A lot changed after COVID. So, but I still want to believe that we can turn it around. I was at Tucker Carlson's show this last summer, and he had a whole plan as to how it could be fixed. He said fairly easily. So, I love California. I'm a California girl forever.
Yeah, you both are, and it's, for me, it's just always so interesting to talk to people who are unhappy with the Democratic rule in Sacramento, who see the state having huge challenges on housing, on homelessness, on transportation, and yet you guys love the state. Like, you guys haven't left, and I find that even conservatives who are unhappy with governance can write like poems about how much they love California. And I feel like you two sort of feel that way. As we say on the internet, am I right? You both are passionate about California.
I was going to bring that up too. I still am attached to it in a literary sense, as far as like we accept the beauty and the destruction, the fires and the earthquakes, the Joan Didion prose that framed California. I'll always be attached to, but it's got its problems.
100%. The views from our beautiful oceans and mountains have not changed. Our wonderful Central Valley that provides the food for the entire world. None of this has changed. It's just the policies that have come out of Sacramento have changed. Our World Championship Dodgers. I love my Dodgers. I love my state. I love being from LA. But I hate what my state has become.
Yeah. Why can't Silicon Valley produce a governor? Why can't some genius, really rich person with great advertising and communication skills come in and fix the state?
Well, I think that we've seen it tried before, right? We saw Meg Whitman in 2020, even Carly Fiorina, who ran for US Senate. We've definitely seen the try. I think at that point, I don't know that California was exactly ready for it. We had just come off of a Schwarzenegger administration, and Governor Schwarzenegger had stopped Democrats from doing a lot of bad things with his veto power as governor. So I don't think that we had gotten to a place where it had gotten so bad that they were ready to make that choice with the way that the demographics had changed, voter registration alone. Because for 15 years in California, Republican voter registration was on a downward trajectory, right? In February of 2019, we took over and we started moving it in the right direction. And for the last 6 years, we registered over 1 million voters. In the last 3 polls that we have seen statewide, California voters at about 48%, 47-48% in those 3 polls have said they are ready to vote for a Republican governor. The problem that we have been running into is that whenever we feed in a name, none of them can get to 48%. And I think you're on the right track. I do think that Silicon Valley might be the answer. And I think some of these tech bros and sisters are ready to make that jump. And I don't know who the right person is yet, but I think that is kind of the place where we should be looking.
Jessica, do you have anybody in mind you'd love if you could just make someone governor? Is there anybody you have in mind?
I don't, but I do have an interest in Chad Bianco, who is running. I think he's going to be a good subject to follow, and I'm excited to learn more about sort of his plans and him as a person and a politician. We need somebody different, with a different plan.
Yeah,
Smart.
I think somebody different could have a great chance to win.
You do.
How would you rate Vice President Harris's chances of being the next governor if she does run? Do you think she's the front runner? Good chance, bad chance? How do you guys see that?
I think she's odds-on favorite. I think the biggest mistake that California Democrats can make is to coronate her. I think that they have to allow people to make their own decisions, whether or not they're going to get in or get out of this race on their own. So I think the biggest mistake that they can make is not giving her a primary.
But you think if she runs, she's the favorite, not just to the nomination, but to win?
I think that we haven't reached a point yet where Republicans are quote unquote dominating. I do think that if she is their candidate, that is the best chance for Republicans to win.
Huh.
I agree.
Jessica Reed Kraus, do you find her appealing at all?
I don't know. I found her really boring and incompetent. Like I couldn't even really attack too many things because for me there was really nothing there. Is that is she a serious contender? Is that what we're looking at?
I don't think she's going to run myself. I think she's too indecisive. That's her big Achilles heel. I've long said she doesn't like to make tough decisions under pressure, and I think the deadline's coming up too quickly. And I think there's two things.
When
that
is
she
the deadline?
decides. Well, she said she's going to decide by summer.
End of summer, they said last
Yeah,
night.
but here's the thing about Kamala Harris. I think she'd be afraid of losing, and I'm not sure she wants to spend the next 4 years in Sacramento. So it's like if you think you might lose, and if you think you don't really want the job, I just can't imagine she's going to pull the trigger and say, "Now I'm going to subject myself to this." That'd be
Well,
my guess.
as your earlier guest has proven, you don't have to spend all of your time in Sacramento. I mean,
You gotta
he's
spend
been
some.
on his national tour for the presidency
Yeah.
for the last 8 years.
Yeah, but he he was there as lieutenant governor. Yeah, California governors spend a lot of time in L.A. and elsewhere, but you can't spend no time in Sacramento, and you've got to do the job, and you have to deal with the legislature. And your legislature, I wouldn't say it's the most unpleasant to deal with in America, but it's right up there.
Pretty close.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the Trump administration. When I was thinking about, well, what do I want to talk to the Jessicas about? I thought it's kind of be like saying, let's talk about the Bible. Like, there's a lot of stories in this administration, right? A lot going on, and themes and people. So I want to start with something I know Jessica Reed Kraus is super interested in, which is MAHA and Bobby Kennedy. Jessica, what are your thoughts about how it's going so far? What's going well with MAHA? What do you wish was going better?
Well, can I first just say I think it's funny you brought up the Bible because I ordered a Bible from Amazon. I haven't read it before. So I do think there are a lot of biblical things happening within this administration, which as a writer, I love. But I mean, I'm a Bobby Kennedy diehard, right? I've watched him from the beginning and I've talked to so many people from the old days who have seen him, what he's gone through to get his message out. And so for me, I am personally very inspired by what's happening. I think he's making a lot of action pretty quickly, and I think he's going full force now that he has a team behind him. So, but there's interesting things happening within the base as far as like, is he not doing enough? Is he not, he said this about autism or he said this about vaccines. It doesn't align with what, we think over here or we think over here. So there's sort of like internal conflict, but I think, I went to the HHS hearing last week and it was about the food dice he's eliminating. And I just think he's on a great path right now. And I am so excited that he's where he's at doing what
Jessica, stay with you for a second. Is there anything you wish was happening faster or that he was doing differently, or you're just basically happy with the whole thing?
Well, I feel like the whole administration is on warp speed right now. I mean, a lot's happening. He has all these studies going on. He's gotten rid of a lot of things that he found unnecessary. And I think he's talking about a lot of things that fringe Americans were interested in. And he's bringing them into a national, making it a national conversation, even the chemtrails stuff. That's like things we used to talk about in quiet corners.
Yeah. Jessica, I've been a believer in the power of the MAHA movement since he's ran originally as a Democrat. Do you have a sense of can you characterize, qualitate? How big is it? How big is its potential, not just to change the health of our kids and our country, but to realign our politics?
I think that the mom movement is huge, right? Back in, the Bush days, we would talk about soccer moms, right? This is something that has been going on for a very long time. And I know I can probably speak for Jessica as well, the other Jessica. We get these, conversations. And when we started, I was a background person for a very, very long time. And once I was out in the foreground with my last job, the amount of moms that would come up to me, and obviously it's very anecdotal, and like whisper to me and, thank you for what you do. Or my husband who works in academia, the people that would come up to him and, oh my gosh, I saw your wife on the news the other day. And so this movement and the things that are being talked about, right? They're like what we would over the, our lifetimes think as common sense things. We want to know what's going on with our kids in school. We want to be the decision makers in their lives. We don't want undue influence on our children and the culture and the values. We think that should be done in the home. These are all things that for a very long time, and I would venture to say our entire lifetimes and prior to that, we have always believed that was the role of the parent. And particularly here in California, we see this radical side of the Democrat Party. It's not all Democrats. It's this radical side of the Democrat Party who do not believe that we have the right to raise our children with the values that we see fit.
Yeah. Again, we're talking to Jessica Millan Patterson, former chair until just recently of the California Republican Party, and my friend Jessica Reed Kraus, who I call Voice of a Generation. If you don't subscribe to her Substack or follow her on Instagram, you're making one of the biggest mistakes of your life. That's that simple. Ladies, I want to talk about the administration again more. Leave out the president, leave out the vice president, and leave out Bobby Kennedy, because I know Jessica has her ties there. Jessica Reed Kraus first. Who would you like to have dinner in the Trump administration, and why?
Dinner. Who would I want to have dinner with?
Yeah.
Susie.
And why? Susie Wiles. Tell us why.
Well, I'm just, I feel like she's sort of a mystery. We know she's a powerful force and she's in charge of a lot of the decisions, and she's, kind of guiding some of these wild characters. I'm so fascinated by her, and I like that we don't know a lot about her. It doesn't seem like she wants to be, really. Yeah, it's like Trump has a lot of people around him who want to be
out
in
there.
front of the camera, out there, yeah. And she's an interesting woman.
I felt so fortunate that I knew her not super well, but I knew her a little bit before, she became famous back in the 2016 campaign. And she is a super interesting person. I agree. Jessica Millan Patterson, who would you choose and why?
So professionally, without a doubt, it's Susie Wiles. I think that she is the neck of the operation. Obviously, President Trump is the head. She is the one that is steering the direction and the work that she does behind the scenes.
If I can book her for a dinner with the four of us, would you guys come to Washington?
I would fly anywhere for it.
Tell us when, Mark. If anyone could do it, it's you.
So I've been wanting to have dinner with Susie, and she's very busy. She's constantly in demand as the chief of staff. So I'm going to use the leverage because she probably would rather have dinner with you two than with me. So stand by. Susie, if you're watching, let's have dinner for four. You know what? She can choose where we go. She's not a big sushi person, I think. So
whatever Susie wants, we're there.
Susie wants. Okay, that sounds good. Who in the administration would you like to give some advice to? If you could speak to one person and tell them what you think they need to do better or differently, who would it be and what would you tell them, starting with you, Jessica Millan Patterson?
So, I generally don't like to be too critical of Republicans. I feel that the Democrats do enough that we have enough to talk about.
But just constructive advice. Doesn't have to be super negative.
Yeah. I would say just a general, stay off the Signal. I think that was an unforced error.
Yeah.
And that would be my advice to the whole group.
The whole group. All right, Jessica, other Jessica, who would you give advice to and what would it be?
Oh gosh, I don't really like giving advice to anyone, but if I had to, maybe Elon Musk, just calm down, sit down, calm down.
Yeah, also good. In terms of media, Jessica, you produce so much incredible content. To keep up with what's going on in not just our politics, but in our culture and in parenting, etc. Jessica Reed Kraus, what are things you read or listen to or watch besides this program that you would recommend to people? What are some things that you find super valuable?
Guides for media?
Yeah, but media broadly defined, to be a good citizen, to understand what's going on, not just with the Trump administration, but with our culture, science, medicine, raising kids. What are things that are important to you to understand?
I mean, honestly, I get a lot of my information from public comments. I go into comments. I watch YouTube videos and I read what everybody's saying, and I go into chat rooms and I go into Reddit forums, and that's kind of where you pull what everyday Americans are thinking. I I don't know that I have regular points in media that I even trust. I feel like it's just such a weird time for media right now, trying to figure out who we trust and who we like and
Yeah.
who we want to give our time to.
Do you read like the Wall Street Journal or the LA Times? Do you read stuff like that?
Yes, I do. I'll read, especially like there's, style sections and stuff. I do read Airmail. I like Airmail. I still like reading Carter stuff.
Uh-huh.
And I read, I love gossip. Tina Brown on Substack. Substack has a great roundup right now, so I kind of stick to mostly the independent angle, but I like reading people comments.
Right. Okay. Other Jessica, what is in your media diet that you would recommend to other people?
Yeah, so I always talk about priorities versus balancing. And so priorities every single day. My number one priority is to be a good wife to Wes Patterson. Number two is to be a good mom to Abby and Maddie. And then my job or whatever all falls underneath that. There are a few things that I think that really affect your everyday life and it's choices that you make every single day. I'm a huge fan of Dave Ramsey. And the financial freedom that comes with his processes. We listen to that with both of our daughters who are 10 and 12. And as the person's calling in, we will say, pause it, tell us when to pause it, and you can tell us when this person has made a bad life decision. So things like that. We're also a practicing Catholic family. And so for us, our faith is something that's critical and central to our entire lives. So when I'm taking the girls to school in the morning, we pray the first 3 decades of a rosary. We go to church on Sundays. This is our community. So I think that there are things that you have control over, certainly the things that you put in front of your children. And, the other day, Abigail and I yesterday, Madeline and I were listening to your podcast. And she heard that Gavin Newsom was going to be on Thursday. And she was like, when is that guy done? Right. So they are politically informed as well. I think that has a lot to do with who their mom is. But, those are the types of things that, we try and be careful about what's put in front of them because the rest of the world will try and brainwash your children. And so it has to be our job to make sure that their foundation, their roots are good enough where they can defend it.
Well, let me ask you about that. Would you guys like the government to play a bigger role in regulating social media? Is that something you'd like to see?
Oh, gosh.
I'm generally against it. I think that is the role of parents. And I think that a lot of parents have given the keys to the children in this instance in giving them phones too early and giving them iPads and, having them be the babysitters of their children. And
are your kids on social media now?
So they have Facebook accounts from when they were born, but they don't have access to them. So I just tag them and everything. But no, they're 10 and 12. They do not have social media. They do not have phones.
Not even access to YouTube?
KidsTube.
KidsTube. All right. Jessica, your youngest boy is how old?
He's just 10. He's going to be 11 this week.
All right. So we're at the same age. How do you feel about government regulation of social media?
I'm conflicted because I do think I have 4 boys and the older ones are all on social media. And it is really hard to monitor for kids, their activity, especially as they get older and they're not around you all the time. I don't know. I was a part of I covered Melania Trump's Take It Down Act. So I think there's some things there where it's really good because, even as an adult, the bullying we go through without any, there's no one to talk to. Like sometimes it is scary when it ramps up and there's literally no one that we can contact to really get it under control. So I don't know. I'm kind of curious to get a public opinion on it because I don't really know.
I want to close by talking a little bit more about the administration. And Jessica Reed Kraus, one of your great gifts is you not just see glamour, but you're able to put it in sharp relief, whether it's in your writing or in video or photos. What's glamorous to you about this Trump term?
What's not glamorous about it? Look at our first lady. Like, I think we have, it's a glamorous era. It's sort of.
But what are you pointing to besides the first lady who is objectively glamorous? Is it the cabinet members? Is it the vibe? What's
Yeah.
glamorous about it?
Well, I think, if you look at Trump as the ultimate showman, which is how I see him, and who he surrounded himself with all these flashy, beautiful characters, Tulsi Gabbard, Bobby Kennedy, Elon Musk. To me, this is the greatest stage and the greatest show on earth right now. So every day I wake up excited to watch the lives, because you're getting like sort of a comedian. You never know who's going to show up at the White House. I find it.
Wait, who's the comedian?
Our president.
Oh, okay. The comic in chief. He's underrated as a comedian. I agree with you. Other Jessica, you like glamour too. Maybe not spend as much time on it, but
I would
what's
say
glamorous?
that it's very interesting that you use this word. I interviewed Senate Majority Leader John Thune last week, and he used that exact word, except in fact, President Trump said to him when they were talking about the big, beautiful bill, he said he's never had a piece of legislation referred to as glamorous. Everything about this presidency, everything about this administration, and all that surrounds it, they are putting in glamour. When we see him talking to networks that we wouldn't expect him to talk to, sitting down with journalists that we wouldn't expect him to talk to, he is doing it because he knows the value of people seeing it. We have these open cabinet meetings because he knows what the value to people seeing what is going on behind the scenes and having these conversations is. And it is all the glamour that you could expect.
What would you say to Democrats or independents who don't like this administration and seem closed off to not just enjoying what you both see in terms of glamour, but being supportive of their agenda? What would you say to them to convince them to be more open-minded?
So I generally wouldn't. The ones that aren't ready to be open-minded to it, like I wouldn't really waste my time on it. Like my job has always been to get more Republicans elected. And if Democrats continue down this path, where I think a lot of them are putting their head in the sand and not paying attention to what happened in November and what's been happening over the last 100 days, I think they do it at their own peril. And this is a time, history tells us that a midterm could be very, very good for the opposition party. But what it seems like for Democrats is they're not going out and doing anything. They're not going out and showing this is what we would do instead, or this is what is wrong with what they are doing. They're just waiting for our plans to fail. And I don't think that you win people over by rooting against America. Jessica and I both live here in California. Neither of us want to see California fail. We want to see California be a successful state. It just hasn't been able to do that over the last 15 years with one party rule. So I don't know that there's a whole lot that you can say to convince people to have an open mind about things. But what I would say is that they have an opportunity, and Republicans have to go and deliver on all of these promises.
Great. Both Jessicas, I couldn't be happier to have you on second episode, and I hope you'll come back and, as we say, make California great again. Whoever the next governor is, I hope they give your kids and your families a great state to live in and address some of the problems that are clearly still bothering a lot of folks. But thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. Had such a great time.
All right. Those are the two Jessicas. When we come back, I'll close things out on Next Up right after this. Thanks for watching this week's Next Up. I'm very grateful to you. We'll see you next week again. We're on Tuesdays and Thursdays on podcast platforms and on YouTube. You can like and subscribe pretty much anywhere you want. Grateful to Governor Newsom and the two Jessicas and to you for watching. We'll see you for Season 1, Episode 3 on Tuesday.